In general, I mean, there's a lot of question marks right now based upon the new tariffs that are in place. So we've been speaking to some of our dry use retailers, our fashion retailers, and I think you're going to start to see some suffering out there, at least for the time being. Hopefully things relax over the next 6 to 12 months, but I think in the beginning it's going to be extremely difficult. I mean, we have a tenant that's coming out of China right now, and I called him up the other night, I think it was Wednesday night, after the 10% tariff went in place, and he's like, 10%? I'm paying 35%. It's brutal, because he's hit 25 and then another 10. So it's going to be challenging. It's going to be a very interesting year to see how retail adjusts and expands through this difficult time of tariffs right now.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the Zelnik Exchange. I am your host, Corey Zelnik, where I take the opportunity to speak to heads of business, a lot of them in the real estate world, but this year we're spreading it out. We're going to talk to some journalists, politicians, police officers, all kinds of people. But the Zelnik Exchange is primarily about real estate and things going on in the real estate world. It is my great pleasure to have my friend Greg Tannor with us today. Greg has been in the business for probably coming up on 25 years at this point. Been a retail broker all of those years. He was with Cushman Wakefield, but currently resides at Lee Associates, I believe, for about 10 years. I'll let him correct me on that if I'm wrong. And he is a partner and principal in their Manhattan Midtown office. And he does all things retail, but primarily he's spent a lot of time, I'd say probably the last 5 or 7 years, focused on the cannabis business from its early stages to where it is today. When Greg and I spoke about a year or so ago, he gave us tremendous insight into what's going on in the cannabis world. And quite frankly, a year later, a lot of things have changed. And so I pulled Greg back in to be part of the Zelnik Exchange so we can learn about some of the changes in that world. Greg, welcome again, and I'm glad to have you.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you. Appreciate being here again.
Great. So if I screw up anything on the bio, you could hit that. But
yeah, it's been about 7 years at Lee Associates, and I am pretty much coming up on 25 years in the business.
Nice. You've been, you're a retail rock star. So firstly, how do you see the retail world these days? Just in general. In general,
I mean, there's a lot of question marks right now based upon the new tariffs that are in place. So we've been speaking to some of our dry use retailers, our fashion retailers, and I think you're going to start to see some suffering out there, at least for the time being. Hopefully things relax over the next 6 to 12 months, but I think in the beginning it's going to be extremely difficult. I mean, we have a tenant that's coming out of China right now, and I called him up the other night, I think it was Wednesday night, after the 10% tariff went in place, and he's like, 10%? I'm paying 35%. It's brutal, because he's hit 25 and then another 10. So it's going to be challenging. It's going to be a very interesting year to see how retail adjusts and expands through this difficult time of tariffs right now.
I think I agree with you. I haven't heard much yet in terms of expansion plan pullback to zero, but definitely a little bit more hesitation. I'm definitely seeing some of that. And, to your point, everyone's going to watch and see how this plays, see what the president does. I don't know, it's a little bit of a power play with the other countries. It's a little bit of a show of force from a United States perspective. And I don't dig too far into the political weeds, but I like to listen because it works its way back to us. But it seems like the tariffs seem to run both ways, and Trump's trying to balance that out. But to your point, it remains to be seen. And like everything else we do in our business, we'll watch, wait, and see, and try to stay as prepared as possible.
Yeah, I mean, the positive that could come out of it is creating more jobs in the States, right? And I think that's part of the plan, is to create these jobs in the States, which would add additional growth on office space, on retail space, and so on and so forth. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I can't say that I follow politics 100%, but the important stuff I'll follow as it relates to business.
No, absolutely. I think that where it ties further into what we're about in our world and these tariffs, it ties further into the construction aspect of things, because development has really slowed down the last 5 or 6 years because of inflation, and now you compound that with the tariffs. The cost of goods are going to keep things slow in the development side. But what I always find as a positive, and I talk about this on a very regular basis, not that you want to see things go bad for people, but when some of these companies the 5,000 and 10,000 store chain that closes 300 stores or 500 stores, it's a little bit of a cleansing for those businesses. But at the same time, it does put a fair amount of supply into the market, which I think is helpful and will be absorbed. And that's a little bit more of a national conversation, but I think that's where there's some benefit to some of those things.
Yeah. Totally
More importantly, and really the main, not more importantly, but the main reason why I have you on, let's talk about cannabis. Give me, if you don't mind, give the audience a little refresher of your start in it, what you've been through and where you're at and where you're taking it, and some of the people, up to you if you could want to mention them or not, your call, you're involved with, and I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, so I mean, I started off in cannabis about 5 years ago through real estate when I got a phone call about the MRTA bill passing, which is the taxation bill for marijuana. And we dropped everything. My partner, Jessica, and we started really vetting landlords and trying to meet every possible tenant out there that's going to open up dispensaries. So fast forward to last year, I think the last time we spoke, there was only about 40 dispensaries open. We were in the middle of an injunction, so there was a pause on opening stores. Now we're sitting here March 6, 2025, with over 315 stores open in the state. The injunction has been lifted. These operators are opening up left and right. There's probably about 5 to 7 new stores a week that's opening up throughout the state. And that's statewide, by the way, the 320. In addition, the cannabis business hit over $1 billion in sales, which is huge, and it's only going to be onward and upward from there. So we've done a number of transactions throughout the state, primarily in the metropolitan area, really focused in on Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, Bronx. And some of those individuals were travel agency that right now there's currently about 320 stores that are open in the state of New York. Sales have exceeded over $1 billion in cannabis sales. That leads to a tremendous amount of tax revenue to help the city and the state rebuild government buildings, streets, employ police, give back to the communities that have been affected from the war on drugs. So we're getting into a really good spot. I mean, there's been articles that said they expect over 625 stores open by the end of 2025. And I think we're on target for that right now.
I remember from our last conversation, more specific to Manhattan, in terms of the physical makeup of the island of Manhattan and some of the barriers or sort of the rules and regs in terms of houses of worship and schools and the things that you have to avoid, that Manhattan was going to be limited physically based upon those rules on how many you can open up. Have those rules changed to make it more opportunistic?
So the schools and the places of worship have not changed in terms of buffer zone. Still, in the rules and regulations, it's 1,000 feet door to door as the crow flies from dispensary to dispensary. We are starting to see something called a variance in special uses that limit that to about 750 feet store to store. So it is changing. There is a good chance that the buffer zone gets reduced so that they can increase the store count in Manhattan. I mean, don't forget, we're talking about an island that's 8.1 miles long. And if you just do the math and you have to be 1,000 feet door to door, there's not enough space. There's only enough space for 44 stores. And then you put in schools and places of worship and it starts to get smaller and smaller. So I think there are going to be a lot of exceptions that come down the road.
Mm-hmm. I had a feeling once, maybe not so much that when they figured it out, but once they got past a certain place and they saw the money, I think that a lot of those rules and regs are political, not to get political, in terms of selling it to the various community boards and things like that. And I just had a feeling this was going to happen, that it was going to happen quicker and they're going to make room for a lot more and they'll start bending the rules. You and I call them variances because that's what they call them, but it's really just, a polite bend of the rules so people can make more money. And I get it. We've all seen it before in all sorts of industries. One of the things I wanted to ask you is I remember again, going back a year, I think when we were sitting together at that point in time, they still had, 1,500 or 2,000 illegal shops that were open. And Mayor Adams was, putting his foot down or just starting to put his foot down. They went out and obviously they made the headlines with their busts here and there and everywhere and what have you. But all of a sudden you don't hear so much of, at least, and I follow the news, stop hearing about those. How many do you think got shut down? Because I still see a fair amount of them still open. And how is that?
So there was it actually worked for the time being. There was over 1,200 illicit shops that got shut down out of 24, 25. There's probably closer to 3,000 or 4,000.
Sure.
But what they started to do is attack, call it the snake's head, and go after the warehouses. And they found tens of millions of dollars worth of product that was supplying all these illegal shops. So number one is they were padlocking the doors, they were kicking them out. And if you walk around the city, which you do every day, you see a lot of these spaces that are available for rent now that used to be smoke shops, and you can see from the facades what they were. But that also helped limit the amount of illicit drugs, but it also increased the legal cannabis side by 25 to 35% in sales per store. So it was a huge impact, and I hope that it continues the way that it was. But you're right, you aren't seeing a lot of that anymore, especially on the news, because they made a big blitz. Right. You saw Mayor Adams burning tens of millions of dollars worth of weed. I'm like, oh no. But yeah, it worked, and it scared a lot of people, and there's a lot of big fines out there in the multi-million dollars as well if you are operating an illicit store, and they were trying to go after the landlords as well, so landlords were getting nervous.
Yeah, no, I understood, and I got into a thing with one of the bids. We'll keep them nameless because I don't know who and how many people watch this show, but one of the bids came after me on one of my properties because at the time we did what a lot of landlords did, right? If you recall, when all the proliferation of all of these illegal shops, it came right out of COVID because there were so many vacant stores, and for the most part, it was mom and pop landlords that were suffering with vacancies and needed to rent their space, and a lot of those deals were done with legal businesses that were selling legal CBDs and gummies and deli products and what have you. And then they really just became, as we all know now, distribution centers for weed. And we had a similar property. We weren't able to give it away. Our pre-COVID tenant was gone. And we had someone come up to us. And at that moment in time, there was nothing illegal about it. So we signed a lease with a group. And everything was working fine until the whole Adams process came about. And we rented the ground floor, and we had a second floor that was still available. So our sign was in it. And so I got a scathing letter from the bid. And I know the guys on the bid. And I said, guys, what? Why are you yelling at me? I'm the broker who ran to rent the store. Call the landlord. I mean, happy to talk to you. And if you're trying to prove something to the members of your bid that you wrote me a letter, congratulations, you wrote me the letter. But this wasn't my choice. I brought an opportunity to the landlord. He made a decision. And so they weren't happy with my tone and how I wrote the letter back, but I was equally unhappy with how they came after me, especially since I know them for so long. Like, what are you doing? What are you trying to prove? But that aside, I still see a lot of these guys open and operating. But I do hear some sketchy things about how some of these tenants are operating their business. Do you pursue any of the illegal shops? I know a lot of them are smaller, but have you found yourself pursuing any of the illegal locations to turn them into legal locations?
I mean, yes and no. We'll take a look at them, but we quickly run compliance on every single site, and there are so many dispensaries that are targeted to open and or are opened that it's kind of buffered out, is what we call it. Right, so all these illicit shops, they don't really do too much for us anymore in terms of trying to capture that space and rebuild it into a legal dispensary. Because as you're walking around the city, you're seeing every 5 to 10 blocks a legal store that's open.
Right. How many?
It's kind of like needles in a haystack right now.
Yeah, interesting. How many groups would you say are out approximately, or if you know exactly, of legal operators are out there still pursuing opportunities in the marketplace?
Tons. We're
Really?
constantly getting calls and emails every day. Like, I need a space. I need a space. I need another space. We have another license. We have this. We have that. It's constant. It's ongoing. It's not ending. I thought 3 years ago we'd have a good ride for about a year or two, but it's continuing on, and I'm super happy about it and excited. I mean, listen, I hit it on both ends. As you know, I'm also the
Yes.
CEO and operator of FlowerHouse NY, which was one of the first cultivator, manufacturer, processor, wholesaler, distributors in the States. So, I'm super incentivized to get as many doors open as
No,
possible as well. It goes on
absolutely.
both sides.
And I was going to take you there, so I appreciate it. So it's just interesting with all of the tons. Well, I'm going to come back to your business in a sec, just to close out on the real estate side. With all of these tons of people that you say that are out there, what I recall from early on from some of the stuff that I had done, they need to have a signed lease somewhere and at an approved location before they can get a license. Is that still accurate?
No, it's completely changed. A lot of these people already have licenses, so
Okay.
they need a signed lease to get something called proximity protection. And proximity protection basically means that you take the signed lease, you submit it to the OCM. The OCM will check the boxes with the lease to make sure that you're in control of the real estate, make sure it fits the zoning, so on and so forth. And if you get the green light, they stamp the approval. You go up on the OCM map saying pending with a little yellow circle and a cannabis leaf,
Okay.
and it's an approved location. Now, you still have work to do to get the space open. You have to build it out. You have to
Of
put your
course.
security cameras in there. You have to order product and put it in the store. Then you get to commence ops. But now people have their licenses. It's not taking a location and applying for a license. You actually have a conditional license that now you need site protection and approvals so that you can open up the store. So things
Okay.
have changed, and those were different rounds of licensing.
Okay. So I'm going to put my landlord hat on. Okay. And Greg Tannor calls me with his licensed cannabis guy, and a broker from another company calls me with his licensed cannabis guy. Am I negotiating simultaneously because it's who gets it first? How does that, and do I do three of them? How does that work? And when does the rubber meet the road where one guy gets it before the other guy?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question, and we're coming up against that constantly now as more brokers are trying to get involved with cannabis. So if you get a call from XYZ broker, whoever it is, and I'm calling you, it's going to be a little bit of a battle. We're going to be in the cage a little bit and fighting it out. Typically, what a landlord would ask for is like, okay, I want to see these decks. Do they have operating history? Do they have capital? The really important questions that are out there. Yeah, you know what? I represent tenants that have multiple locations in the state. They've been operating. They can show their balance sheet, and they can also show their revenue from one store, two store, three store, four store, whatever it is. And they have real people behind it with credit and capital, human and both monetary capital to sign these deals.
Okay,
So
and that's
it's starting to come down to like who the operator is now. Obviously we're all fighting for the space to get proximity protection, but it's going to come down to who the operator is now.
all right. And again, this is, I know it, not to make it a challenging question, but a little bit of a challenging question. You bring me your guy, and the other guy brings me his guy, and everything you just said is 100% accurate. And let's just say it's equal for both sides. Am I hosting a bidding war for the location? What becomes what? I'm trying to understand where or why do I go with you or him to allow you to go get your yellow proximity flag?
I mean, it's really going to come down to who you feel comfortable with
Okay.
as an operator and as a tenant. It goes down to now store design. What are the elements of the store? What is it going to look like? If you're representing a co-op is going to get involved and want to make sure that it's prestigious looking and it doesn't, deteriorate the value of their apartments upstairs. And the same thing with an office building as well. If you're representing an office building, you want to make sure that it's compliant and it looks really nice for the type of offices that are upstairs.
Sure.
So
I mean, yeah,
it's going to come down to store design. I mean, if you're negotiating against me, I'm going to come at you hard, Corey, and I'm going
yeah,
to
of
make you
course.
take my deal for the most part.
Okay, good. That's good. Well, I
Um,
know yours are the
just
best
because I
customers.
truly
Um,
believe.
yeah,
Exactly. I truly believe in my operators. I've been at this since day one before
yeah,
anyone else has. And, with Jessica as well, we're fighting each day for space and why our tenants are better than other people and because they have operating history now. You know,
that's great. And
imagine 3 years ago imagine 3 years ago when before these stores were even open to get landlords to believe in us. They took a lot of risk with us, and I give them a lot of credit because they're all basically laughing to the bank now and been like, we got a lot of rent. We got a great tenant. They're COVID
right,
proof, any pandemic proof, basically recession proof as well, and now tariff proof because everything in New York is grown here, is sold here. There's no cross border because it's not federally legal, and nothing's coming in
right.
from overseas except for packaging. So that's the only thing that we have to worry about as an operator is our packaging costs went up by 10 cents.
Sure, sure. But one of the most interesting things I think you said in that brief little diatribe in terms of a response, and I mean that in a good way, was that any co-op or even office building is even having a conversation with a cannabis operator. Because I know certainly a year ago when we were talking, and even before that, none of those buildings were ever having that conversation under any circumstances.
Well, now it's proven. Now people actually see
Yes.
it, they feel it, they smell it, they believe it. And, with $1 billion of sales in the state, it's truth and it speaks for itself now. And now landlords really want it.
And how is that playing out? There was a lot of conversation because I think what is it? It's still federally. It's still considered an illicit
Illegal.
drug, and so that
Correct.
plays into the banking aspect of this and taxes. How is that working out
Exactly.
these days?
So it's really about the banking issues with landlords, and there are certain landlords that will pay off their note or refinance the building with a cannabis-friendly lender so that they can get that operator into the space.
Interesting, interesting.
People are being
That's
super creative.
yeah. I would imagine that's probably on a smaller building, but I think that's creativity, and I get that.
No,
Um,
it's on bigger Corey, it's on bigger buildings as well. We had a
okay, great.
landlord, and I'll just leave his name. We had a landlord that called us, and this was a couple of months ago, and he said, "Remember, we were talking a couple of years ago about cannabis?" He's like, "I purposely paid off my entire note," and we're talking about a lot of money, millions and millions of
Right,
dollars. It's a big building,
right.
and he's like, "I paid off my note for cannabis. Like, I want the operator, I want the tenant. Go get it."
Great. That's great. Good for you. That's
Times
fabulous.
are changing.
Um, who
Yeah.
is yeah? Who is this sort of fancy schmancy group that I read about in Times Square with the I'm drawing a blank
Charlie
on the name,
Fox.
but I saw an article. Well, who is it?
Charlie Fox over at
Who?
719
Charlie
7th
Fox. Right?
Avenue, 30 Times Square.
Yeah, they took the old was it the brand
It
the
was like Revlon.
Jesus, was it
Revlon?
Revlon or Chloe Kardashian had a product. One of them had a product. They took the whole building, and that lasted about as long as you and I would imagine it would have lasted. And now the cannabis people have stepped in. So that's pretty interesting. It makes for good press for the industry.
I'm going to reserve comment on that store.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. That's fair. I'm not trying to quiz you on anything. I thought it was just an interesting read just from a general, this is what's going on, and look, believe me, I'm from a family of publicists and PR machines and all that, so I get that. I get that too. Let's
Yeah,
talk. Let's talk.
it was great. It was great press. It was great press for the industry. And we'll leave it
Right.
at that for Charlie Fox. Yeah.
Done. Let's talk about your business. What's going on?
Sure. We're growing in all ways.
That's
So
pun
at
intended. That's
Flower
pun
House,
intended.
yeah, that's pun intended, all pun intended. We have become one of the bigger players in the market. We're one of the top 10 brands in the state out of a couple of hundred brands out there. We still focus on smokable flower, on our eighths, ounces, pre-rolls. But what's more exciting is certain brands that we've brought on that we now do their manufacturing, processing, sales, wholesale, and distribution. That's Holiday, which is vapes, and we're making vapes for them. We have Nova Edibles. We are representing Tyson 2.0. And something that's super exciting is coming out in April, the second week of April, we're launching Carmelo Anthony's brand called Stay Mellow. He is very involved in the cannabis space. He's also involved in the wine, health, wellness, and it's just all coming together for him. He has his brand in Oregon right now called Stay Mellow, and we are now partners with him at FlowerHouse to launch Stay Mellow with Carmelo April 20th.
Very nice.
It's going to be at a store near you. Yeah, it's super exciting. We're doing activations. Yep.
That's great. And it's not a coincidence that I have his jersey. That jersey's always up there. I think I told you.
We'll try to get it signed. We'll try to get it signed for you.
No, it is signed. It's signed with I have an authentic. What is it? An authentication thing or something? A letter of authentication, because I wanted at a Knicks quiz that they ran before one of the games, and I think I might have mentioned this offline. I'm just waiting for him to get nominated for get into the Hall of Fame. I think I'll maximize the value, and then there it goes.
We're all praying for the same thing. We should know in April. Let's keep our fingers crossed for him. He's an amazing individual. He's super involved in the business, super smart guy, and I just love working with him. He's great. That's great.
So tell me, Greg Tannor, does Greg Tannor stay a retail leasing broker while this thing continues to take off? Tell me where you're going with this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never quit retail leasing. I love it. I'm a deal junkie by heart. I've been doing it since I was 21, 22 years old. I can't get out of this business no matter what I'm doing. I still enjoy it. I still have clients that have been with me for 17, 18 years. And I just love the art of the deal too much to ever give it up 100%. I mean, I'm juggling a lot right now, running FlowerHouse, being the CEO there, running the brokerage side as well. But I have a great support team, and I rely on them every day.
No, that's great. I wasn't trying to make you make some kind of crazy statement or out you in any way, shape, or form. I think that kudos to you for what you're accomplishing.
Did Peter Browse put you up to that?
Yeah, he's sitting over there. No, I'm kidding. No, it was none of that. But really, I mean it. You and I know each other a long time. In weird sort of ways, but mostly in the real estate industry kind of way. And I'm a fan of yours for what you do on a day-to-day leasing basis, and I'm a big fan of yours in terms of what you're doing in the cannabis world. And I just wish you continued success. And a year, maybe another year from now, we'll do another cast and we'll talk. And you'll be the cannabis king in New York if you're not almost there already.
Well, what would be cool, like in a year, is to actually bring you on site and do a live interview at one of my facilities.
It'd be my pleasure. It'd be my pleasure. We'll have some. If you get to that place and I'm in this place doing this kind of stuff, which I probably will be, I'd love to have it. We'll have some fun, and we'll definitely do that. So I'm telling Steph to mark down the date, and that's where we'll be.
Perfect. We'll do it next April.
Look forward to it. All right, brother. Keep up the great stuff, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Corey.